Okay, so the next part of the process is we're moving to the ULO, CLO, MLO alignment. Now, this is where we're actually going to be putting our units in. And so as we put the units in, so you can see I have the units already entered in here. Any of them that had more than 4 unit learning outcomes, we've already made those adjustments. And so we have put in just the 4 unit learning outcomes. Now, a lot of times we'll add rows, so you can just click on this and you can insert a row, and what I would do is just add all of them in here and then make adjustments. And anytime I make adjustments, I usually color code it or put comments in, so then that way it's easy to follow up with putting those amendments through. So what you can do is here you're going to put the Bachelor of Arts. These are the core units, so only the core go here. In the Bachelor of Arts they have a whole bunch of specializations which they go in a whole nother area. And so we're only putting the core units. So in this instance there are 6 core units. We've put them in here. We've identified their level of study, so 1,000, 2,000, or 3,000 for the core units. And then our course learning outcomes have copied over from this spreadsheet right here. So we've already done these and they copy straight over into the next spreadsheet. As we fill out all of these unit learning outcomes in here, and we put in our units in the order of 1,000s to 2,000s to 3,000s, they will copy over into the final worksheet where we're going to be looking at assessments and rationales. Now, once we have these in here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through and looking at where they map to. So what course learning outcomes that unit maps to, and it won't map to all of them. And we need to be looking at whether it's emerging, increasing, or attaining. So since this is a 1,000 and it's an AQ of 7, this would be basically 1. So this is their introductory or foundation units, and most of them will have 1s with maybe some 2s in it. What we're doing is we're looking at how this maps to these course learning outcomes. So this number is not in relation to the unit learning outcomes. We're assuming that all unit learning outcomes are attained. We are mapping it to the course learning outcomes. So within all of these units, by the time we get to the end, we should have had a 1, 2, and 3, or 1s, 2s, and 3s across each of these course learning outcomes, so that students have had the ability to have emerging, increasing, and then attaining those course learning outcomes. All right, so you can see that here we say read and critically analyze a range of texts. This one says apply critical analysis, reasoning, and reflexivity to social and cultural situations and problems. So that one maps there. And then this also says access, evaluate, and present information using academic conventions to interpret information. And so here they're reading and critically analyzing a range of texts, and so that also gets mapped here. Construct a coherent argument, or demonstrate the ability to develop a persuasive independent argument. So again, you have coherent argument, so you're kind of looking for these key words. So you want this to be explicitly mapped, not implicitly. Okay, so the words have to basically align in some form. All right, so once you've done that and you keep moving down, and as I said, this really has to be carried out by the course coordinator and the people involved in each one of these units. So the UAs or the lecturer, because they're the ones that actually know what those unit learning outcomes are representing and then where they would map. And this is also true for the assessment area. The person involved in those units really actually needs to be the one that's there mapping their units. So this is typically done as a group, and then you work through this spreadsheet and then the next one that has the assessments. So if you look at the instructions, all right, so it goes through here talking about emerging proficiencies, increasing proficiencies, and attaining proficiencies. And so that's your study level, and there is a link here which explains the study levels, which is a 0 to 7 or 1 through 7, so that's 1,000 to 7,000 units. And so you can see that emerging proficiencies would be most often in the 1,000s, increasing proficiencies in the 2,000s, and then attaining proficiencies would be in the 3,000s and 4,000s. Postgraduates are 5,000, 6,000, and then doctorate is 7,000. So these proficiencies are mapped across the courses, and like I said, you actually want to see 1, 2s, and 3s in each of the course learning outcomes. Now there is an area that is color-coded, and it basically looks at the average that you have, and this is just to bring your attention. So if you have something that's less than 2, you need to go back and look at it, because that probably means that you have possibly no 3s mapped, or you're missing somewhere. So it's really just a guide. If you have 2s, you just want to check it. Anything that's over a 2, that means that pretty much you have 1s, 2s, and 3s. But if you have 2s, you just go back and check. So you could even have a couple 3s in units, but maybe there's no 2s, and so you have 1s and you have 3s, and that's giving you your 2 average. So that's why you're just kind of using this as a guideline. You go back through, you look, and you make sure that you actually do have 1, 2s, and 3s. If this says 3 down here, then you're fine. And so here is an example. And so this is just showing you how you have 1s, 2s, and it says, notice that the same CLO has a different level assigned to it depending on the level of the unit. So this is a 1,000, but it's a 1,000 that's right before the 2,000, so it's kind of a transition. And so in those transition units, you might find 1s and 2s, or 2s and 3s. Okay, so we're just going to go back to the spreadsheet. So you can see, you're just going to scroll down. And so you can see here that we're missing some of those 3s. And this only has a 1, a couple 2s, and a 3. So we're kind of missing some of these, but we know that this, and if we look down here, you can see that. But we know that this actually has majors that they have to do on top of the core. So the way that this Bachelor of Arts works is that you have a core, and then you have one specialization that you take. And so you would be expecting that specialization to pick up some of these higher level completions of the course learning outcomes. And so that will be mapped on the specialization sheet, which is down here, which is your major specialization. And so here we have the major specialization. So this one has 1, 2, 3, it has 8 units that sit within the specialization. We have created our major learning outcomes, and every specialization has to have major learning outcomes, and you have to have an aim that you have filled in here for the aim of that major. So why are they taking that major? What's the reason, the purpose? What are they going to get out of it? And then here you have the major learning outcomes, which can come from a combination of threshold learning outcomes. So you can look at the threshold learning outcomes and create some major learning outcomes from it, or just kind of in general from the aims of the major, you can have an idea of what those major learning outcomes should be. So here we have 5 major learning outcomes, and again we have put our units in order. So we have 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000, and of course this one has more 3,000s in it, which we would expect because it is the specialization of that bachelor degree. And so you can see that we have 1s and 2s and 3s. You would then go back to this first spreadsheet because you're going to map the MLOs to the course learning outcomes now. And so once we've done that, we'll come back here, and you can see that this says that this is a 2 and this is a 2. And again, this is just an average, and I would go back in and I would look at the first MLO, which I can see there's plenty of 3s, and the second MLO doesn't have a lot, but it has a couple. And what I would do is I would come back here, and I know actually that these are correct, and I can just put a 3 in, and that will override it. And then that means that these should actually be 3s. Because and that is correct, my major learning outcomes or my specializations, they should be at a 3 level because they have the specializations or the more advanced units. And so then when I look through these, I had some that didn't have 3s, and I can see that my major learning outcomes now cover those. And so I have provided 1s, 2s, and 3s for all of my course learning outcomes between my core units and my specializations. And remember that the specializations are mapped to the major learning outcomes, and then your major learning outcomes are automatically put in here to the level, and then you just need to do the same process. You take your major learning outcomes and you map those depending on their wording. You map them to the course learning outcomes. So again, that's looking at the verbiage being used and actually linking that. So here, demonstrate an understanding of cultural study theories and terms and how they are able to generate cultural change. So if we look up here, we have demonstrated depth and breadth of knowledge and understanding of social and culture in chosen discipline studies. It maps there. And apply discipline knowledge to diverse contexts. So that maps very well to both those at a 3. And so that's basically what you're doing, is you're just going through and mapping them to the words that are here and to where they best align with your course learning outcomes. All right, so we've now covered your course learning outcomes and your major learning outcomes and mapping your unit learning outcomes to your course learning outcomes and mapping your major learning outcomes back to your course learning outcomes once you have mapped. And if you look in the directions, you'll see that this is your course learning outcomes. Okay, and on page 28, we have aligning specialization majors and minors, so that's this tab right here. So we're going to do those first, and that's why I've gone through them before we tackle assessments. And so here are descriptions or examples of how you can create your major learning outcomes. Like I said, they can come from threshold learning outcomes or from your actual aims. And so here's the one that we used, which was based on the threshold learning outcomes. And again, you can see that the mapping, you have 1s, 2s, 3s, it's increasing with the level of complexity of the units they're taking. And I talk about what I've just explained there with the alignment, that what you're doing basically is you look at those, you can see that there are actually 3s when you go back and check, so you can override those and change them, as I showed you how to do in the video. All right, so that should give you a good understanding of mapping those.